In the latest episode of The Business of Creators, I speak with ThriveCart CEO Ismael Wrixen about their new 2025 Creator Economy report.
We're expecting it to reach about $600 billion by 2030, up from the $250 billion or so in 2023.
Ismael shares some huge numbers about the transactions on the platform.
We do about $2 billion a year in terms of payments. We sell well over 10 million products a year on behalf of our customers.
Along with what it takes for creators to be successful.
I would say the specialization is mandatory at this stage for those kind of seeking to carve out a piece of the kind of new order, for themselves. We definitely see some things that people do to stand out. And the big one is always, offering, something for free, be that, documents, courses, webinars, but, really kind of demonstrating, value first and foremost.
If you're wondering where the creator economy is heading in the next few years, you definitely don't want to miss some of the ideas in this discussion. So ThriveCart just released the 2025 Creator Economy Industry Report. Can you tell us some of the big trends that you saw in it?
One of the big trends that we're seeing, obviously, is the sector is growing. I mean, we're expecting it to reach about $600 billion by 2030, up from the $250 billion or so in 2023. AI adoption is definitely kind of shaping part of that. We're seeing, we're expecting 39 to 40% of workplace skills are going to be obsolete or retooled, one or the other. Different companies calling it different things. Accenture recently have gone through a retooling exercise with 11,000 of their staff. So really, there's a huge opportunity for both kind of companies and individuals to, see a lot, be a part of that growth. So companies, we have seen up to 2023 training budgets, were falling. That may have come out of the back of, the pandemic and lots of other things, and, in office, out of office, and kind of really starting to lay the new groundwork, pre-AI, I would say, certainly the growth we've seen in AI over the past kind of couple of years. But we are kind of seeing that trend reverse now. And, one of the interesting pieces within that is that external, learning and training, it is going up. I mean, that's up about 23% at the moment. So we're definitely seeing, some very strong and positive indicators in terms of the kind of the sector in general. And then as part of that, niche creators, they're the ones that really stand to benefit the most here. I mean, they see, quite a lot more engagement, the kind of the more generic creators out there. And these are the ones that, certainly will potentially stand to benefit from, a lot of this kind of retooling and general growth that we expect across the next 4 to 5 years.
Excellent. Well, I'm really excited to get into some of the detail of this. Now, I know as a business, you process over $2 billion for creators. What patterns stand out from you from that data?
Yeah, that's right. So we do about $2 billion a year in terms of payments. I mean, niche creators, they're definitely the ones that outperform. I mean, there is a lot of noise out there. So, I would say that the more niche you can get, the better. But just because of that noise, we definitely see some things that people do to stand out. And the big one is always, offering, something for free, be that, documents, courses, webinars, but, really kind of demonstrating, value first and foremost before getting people into kind of, cycles. So, then you can certainly go into courses, upsells, subscription, memberships, owning the audience, things to increase kind of the lifetime value of a customer over time. And then obviously you can, use a platform like ours to really kind of dive into automation, checkout optimization to kind of get those higher conversion rates and boost, average order values. Things that, the creators that are most successful are the ones that kind of go, super niche, but also kind of really try and demonstrate value, ahead of, potentially selling something to people with a view of long-term subscription and memberships being kind of the ultimate goal.
Makes absolute sense, yeah. And what do you see as ThriveCart's biggest differentiator in the ecosystem of like Kajabi, Teachable, Gumroad, and the other platforms out there?
Yeah, so, the thing with ThriveCart is, and there are lots of, fantastic platforms out there, but, first and foremost, we are a payment and checkout platforms. As you mentioned, we do about $2 billion in annual sales. And what we get from that is really kind of absolutely no weak links. The last thing you want to do is put all of this time and effort into, getting somebody in front of creating the product, getting somebody in front of the product, be that through organic or paid channels, or, the chat GBTs of the world now, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But, the last thing you then want is, your not to have a kind of optimized payment experience, and also not to be able to offer certain other things along the line like upsells, downsells, prorating, multiple bumps, all the kind of things that could increase average order value. So that is kind of how the business started, and we've certainly kind of added over time. We have all the everything else that the others have that you mentioned there as well, in terms of LMS platforms and affiliate platforms and kind of no code drag and drop website builders and all of that kind of stuff. But really the core is the payments. And because of that, and because of the volume that we do, we've been able to go to our partners like Stripe and actually create our own payment platforms with them, kind of unique to the kind of ThriveCart experience, which means that higher conversion rates, better tooling, and some of the newest tooling as well that isn't available off the shelf. But it also means kind of better security, cyber security. Obviously, as kind of we push further and further into AI, is going to become even more prevalent to platforms like ours. So kind of those controls, the AI controls, the fraud preventions, these are things that our platform absolutely excels at. And also for our customers, I would say that we have scale. So, we sell well over 10 million products a year on behalf of our customers. That could be digital products or physical products. So a lot of platforms don't do the physical product side. They kind of leave that to the Shopify's of the world. But we certainly do. And because of that, it means that, you can trust that our platform during a heavy period of volume, or a Black Friday, or, whatever else it might be, we can certainly handle it because, as I said, it is the kind of core of what we do. And because of that, and because of our volume, we don't feel the need to do things like take a revenue cut, of kind of sales, or kind of, I think people put it in as kind of additional payment processing fees. I've seen them anywhere between 5 and 15% of sales, which for a creator, especially just getting started, that's a huge sum to pay. We kind of see that it's better to leave that in the hands of the creator and really kind of leave them to kind of reinvest that into their own growth over time. And I'm really a big fan of a rising tide lifts all boats. So kind of that's the ethos that we like to go for. So certainly we are the all-in-one. We have the LMS. I think we have about over 12 million students enrolled, tons of integrations and things. But I would say like the big thing for us is we're here to help people make their first dollar, make their first 7 figures, 8 figures, and beyond. And because you can, either use our own platform or embed us wherever you want to go, ThriveCart can always be part of your stack, irrespective of how big you get, over time. Again, really kind of focusing on the fact that we bring the best payment solutions to those seeking it.
That's great to hear. And I mean, there's so many transaction types and emerging product formats. And for the creators listening, is there anything you think is underrated right now?
I think overall, one thing I would say is like people are willing to spend more than you might necessarily think. The first sale is definitely the hardest, but then kind of getting people into that kind of membership cycle, high ticket events as well. I mean, we see people go from free products to low tier membership to mid tier membership to 4 or 5, figure ticketed events for masterminds and those type of things. So really kind of, that format is tried and tested, but not enough people, I would say, kind of go the full way with it, because sometimes there's a perception of, things might get, too expensive over time, but there are always people who are kind of hyper focused in their own development and their own learning. And if you provide a solution, that is kind of positioned well and really does provide value, then, there's certainly, a lot of people willing to jump on those. Really kind of the idea for anyone is kind of get to the point where you're kind of, running a community. That's good for kind of increasing the engagement of your products in front of your own audience, obviously. But then on top of that, it keeps that audience captive, and then it makes it a lot easier for you to potentially sell future things to them over time. So instead of starting every new product with 0 or just an email list of past customers, for example, you have an active community there to jump straight into, and that community will give you really, really good feedback as you go as well. So everybody's in it together. The community all benefits when the product solutions, the engagements, interactions, are very, very high quality. So they also become, very, very good advocates, of products as well. Really kind of, I would say that, taking that community focus for the longer term engagement is the piece that really differentiates, really successful creators from those that are not quite so successful.
That's really fascinating to hear. And where's your business focus for the next 3 years? Are there particular tools or integrations that you're most excited about?
I think, the face of the internet is changing now. So, I mean, at the OpenAI demo day that this just happened, they've announced their new version of the App Store, which I think has had a couple of iterations now. But for the payment space, in general, yeah, it's definitely going that route. That there are, Stripe has recently announced that they've been working with OpenAI to bring payments directly onto the platform. We're going to be working with Stripe on that to kind of bring that through our platform, very soon as well. I think, the kind of learning management side of it, it's kind of the student kind of content management will be, in the very near future, very easy to digest through, things like this app store that's been announced and lots of others that will come as well. Agent payments, on the protocols around that have recently, been defined, released, and, we're starting to see utilization of that too. So I think, agent to agent payments is going to be very, very important, going into the future as well. And then for us as a business, I mean, integrations, yes, I think we have over 50 of them now, direct integrations plus Zapier, and we will add more over time. But for us, as we are seeing, the possibilities of what can be done with AI now, we're actually bringing kind of AI design tools, ads platforms, auto webinar, auto responders, and a new LMS to market ourselves. So probably relying a little bit less on integrations, but we have plenty of them as it is. And I think for us in the business in general, we are certainly going to lean very heavily into kind of the marketplace idea. So not just helping people kind of facilitate highly secure and successful payments and utilize our platform and all our kind of MarTech and other tools to do that, but also starting to provide a captive audience through kind of places like, ChatGPT, OpenAI, but through our own means as well, just because we've sold, I think it's close to 70 million, products at this stage. We have a huge amount of people in our own ecosystem. So taking our own advice, we are really going to be kind of, doubling down and focusing on the people that we have within that ecosystem and doing more with them.
Wow, that's great to hear. Lots in the pipeline then. So let's talk about it from a creator perspective. And you sort of touched on this earlier, but why do you think specialization has become almost mandatory for creators in 2025? And how can new creators sort of find their niche without boxing themselves in too tightly?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is definitely driving a huge amount of generic content, and it's only natural until we get to kind of super AI that everybody's going for. I mean, that is going to be a lot of what you get there. So I think it does give people the opportunity to specialize, and it gives people the opportunity to talk from like actual experience. And if you don't have experience, go get the experience. It was, I think Mark Cuban at some point in time said something along the lines of, you don't need a college degree anymore. Everything you have is on the internet. And that is, as true today as it's ever been. So I think certainly, specialization it is now kind of, like I said, mandatory, as we kind of touched on at the top of the conversation. Corporate training, individual kind of betterment learning, it is going down that route as well. So I think people need to kind of certainly lean into it, and it will become more and more important as more and more generic content is put out into the universe. So yeah, people are definitely paying or kind of interested in paying for kind of quality depth, solving a real problem. So I would say that the more niche and like the micro niches, like ADHD for entrepreneurs or burnout recovery or those type of topics are things that kind of giving a real solution to a real problem. And, for people, who that is, useful and applicable to, they're, the type of people that you can, certainly offer something to, get into a community and provide, long-term value to. So yeah, I would say that specialization is mandatory at this stage for those kind of seeking to carve out a piece of the new order, for themselves.
Really interesting. And the report also highlights creators like Miss Excel who built empires around sort of one specific skill. Kat's actually been on this podcast. Why do you think micro niches sort of command sort of 3 to 5 times higher rate?
Yeah, that's a great example, actually. I think in the first 24 hours of that launch, it was $50,000 or more. And now it's kind of consistently seeing, 6-figure months. So, I mean, that's a fantastic, story. And the good thing that I like about that is kind of touching on the previous point. It's solving a real problem when people need, an answer the most. But it's also a very big topic that can be subdivided into many, many sub niches, sub niches too. So it touches on kind of a very unique case where you can get very specific, but in a very broad range of, subcategories there as well, which just gives that brand the ability to kind of keep growing and keep engaging over time. But yeah, I think it comes down to people need a real solution to a real problem. And if you are providing to them at the time when they need it the most, that's when you're going to see those kind of, higher rates to 3 to 5 times, that you mentioned there. That is a winning formula, and one that certainly, Miss Excel has absolutely perfected.
From a creator perspective, is there a way to sort of test and validate whether their niche is scalable before they go all in?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few kind of schools of thoughts on this. I mean, starting, small digital product free, it could even be as simple as a template or a mini course or something like that. Then you can go really, really deep and use analytics tools like ours to kind of measure conversion rates, retention, upsell rates, downsell rates, all of the good stuff that goes into that. But really, I would say kind of iterating quickly before scaling up, finding that market fit, and speaking to customers. That's the thing. I mean, the data will show you, certainly a wealth of information, but also just having those conversations with people. And you tend to find that, if people end up becoming a customer or they don't end up becoming a customer or student or whatever it might be, they might still and often still have the time of day to have a conversation about, what they did like and what they didn't like. So often just asking is a very kind of simple, direct way to do it, but an underrated way of doing it as well. We've certainly seen people on our platform, who are now running 6, 7 figures, put out a multitude of these kind of mini courses, templates, etc. Once they start to see traction, then they actually build around that. So we would also always say kind of don't feel like you have to create everything from start to finish, before actually kind of getting ready to launch something, because you might just end up getting in your own way and ultimately not get anywhere. So the feedback you're going to get from customers, is the best validation possible. So the more of that you can do and the faster you can do that, the better. And now obviously you have all the AI tools and everything else to help build out these offers, once you figure that out. So if anything, more time can now be spent on the validation stage and doing as many of those, iterations as you can before then kind of diving into, a full build out of a 6 months, 12 months, 2 year course or program, because that bit has certainly been shortened in terms of the tools now available to do it.
Excellent. Really good advice there. So it's 2025. Let's talk about AI and the future of work. I know the report, you mentioned it earlier, actually, 39% of workplace skills are set to be obsolete by 2030. Do you think creators are the ones that are best positioned to retrain the workforce?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And actually, like the way, I mean, this is my personal opinion, is that, the workforce is now going to be judged on skills, not necessarily experience. And I think those can be kind of two very, very different things. There are certainly situations where somebody is in a position because they've been in that position in that company for 5, 10, 20 years, and it's the natural progression, of a hierarchy. Whereas, with all of the AI tools and other things that we have now it's a case of what skill do you actually bring to the firm, and can that skill be done better by somebody else with different tooling, or can it just be done by tooling? I think now kind of really getting back to kind of meritocracy, and yeah, creators, are definitely faster, more agile. As we touched on, there is a lot of noise, standing out, and companies will start to invest, very, very heavily, in identifying kind of the top ones there. But businesses really just want practical ROI driven skills. Currently, creators can deliver that, and there are enough creators out there that it can match the kind of scale that is needed. Going forward, it will be a case of, what happens to that 39% number, and what happens after 2030, but certainly for the next kind of, 4 to 5 years, creators are definitely the ones that are the best place to fill that space.
As one of the other stats that jumped out to me was that the report highlights that universities meet only 0.2% of AI learning demand. Do you think this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity for creators to become educators around AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And, even OpenAI themselves have now launched their kind of education and certification plans, and I think that it's because the numbers are so big. I mean, 57 million Americans want AI skills. This is just America want AI skills, but fewer than 9 million are getting it. So certainly there has been a push in multiple countries through kind of formal education systems to do more. But for those universities and beyond, it might be a little bit, too little, too late as they kind of start to get into the workforce. So that kind of creates a huge opportunity for that kind of personal development and kind of corporate development that we've been speaking about. But yeah, I mean, the generations behind that who are going, earlier in the education system, that may differ greatly. And you would imagine it would as well, as kind of, that more and more investment is going into these kind of, AI skills. But certainly kind of where we are today, those joining the workforce, they are being, underserved in certain situations. And that's really where kind of, that kind of huge opportunity comes, for the creators out there willing to fill the gap.
Great. Well, Ismail, it's been fantastic to learn about ThriveCart and the report. Before we wrap up, I just wondered a couple of questions. If you had to bet on one creator economy sector to grow the fastest over the next 5 years, could be something like wellness or education or personal growth, which would it be and why would you choose that?
Yeah, I mean, today it's definitely like images and videos. I think everybody's having a lot of fun with those, but that will eventually kind of become very commoditized and piece. And obviously, I'm sure there's going to be tons around that, but we're already seeing that happen a little bit. I think that, yeah, I mean, the topic we've been touching on, kind of the education AI skills, that's kind of the next phase of kind of big demand, certainly kind of as I see it, and that huge gap being left by institutions that creators can fill. Then I think if we start to look kind of a little bit more, a little bit further out, and we start to consider, well, a GBT app store, I think it's going to follow a similar pattern. I mean, ultimately the technology is new, but that doesn't mean human behavior is necessarily new. So if you kind of take lessons from the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store and those kind of things, it is productivity apps, it is wellness apps. I think wellness is going to hit $9 trillion by 2028 from like 6.3 trillion a couple of years ago. So it's going to follow, very, very similar patterns. That what we're seeing with AI now is the kind of infrastructure layer is being built. That's probably going to be another, I mean, it will continue into perpetuity, I'm sure, but really that will be kind of the main focus, kind of agentic coding and those kind of things for, in context engineering, those kind of things for the next maybe 12 to 18 months. But after that, and you're already starting to see it, you then are going to have the application layer that is kind of the entrepreneurs out there creating products and tools. And productivity and wellness have always been kind of very, very solid performers, and that kind of marries very well with the creator economy, because both of those things are huge areas where tooling plus plus learning go hand in hand. So yeah, I would say that would be my expectation for kind of the mid to longer term.
So many wise words in there. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to learn about the business, and I'm really excited to follow the journey and see the creators really take advantage of your great platform.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.